Everyone. I'm Meta Polywall with the Orange County Water District, and I'm excited to welcome you to our webinar today. Today, our speakers will dig deep into the issues of sediment and how effectively managing sediment impacts our water supply here in Orange County and beyond. And yes, that was my attempt at a sediment pun. But in all seriousness, you're in for a really great discussion today, and I'm excited to introduce our speakers shortly. But before we get started, I wanted to mention that attendees are muted to reduce background noise as we are in webinar mode. The webinar is being recorded and will be published on OCWD's YouTube channel. Lastly, we'll take questions at the end of the presentation, and we'll do our best to address questions most relevant to the topic at hand today. So please do use that Q&A box throughout the webinar or at the end to submit your questions on today's topic. And if you think of anything after the fact, you're also welcome to just email us at info@ocwd.com for any follow-up questions as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce our great speakers here with us today, and we're going to be going in this order, but I'll introduce everyone here. Lisa Haney is the Executive Director of Planning and Natural Resources at the Orange County Water District. She is a leader in strategic planning and innovative regional solutions, and she oversees the Planning and Natural Resources departments here at OCWD. Under Lisa's oversight, these departments prepare the district's environmental documents, resource agency permit applications, groundwater management plan, resilience plan, and conduct the district's natural resource management, watershed planning, and recharge planning. Lisa has more than 25 years of experience in public utilities and regulatory policy and compliance. Lisa will be followed by Kevin, and Kevin O'Toole is a senior planner with over 15 years of service at the Orange County Water District. Throughout his tenure, Kevin has established himself as a vital liaison between stakeholders in and around Orange County. In his current role, Kevin collaborates with local stakeholders, regulatory agencies, and public entities to implement studies, programs, and projects focused on preserving, enhancing, and protecting both the quality and quantity of the water used to recharge the Orange County groundwater basin. And lastly, we will close it out, and lastly but not least, we will close it out with Makana Nova. Makana joined OC Parks in 2023 and serves as the Coastal Resources Manager. In her role at OC Parks, Makana has facilitated and permitted coastal projects and grants for the beneficial sand reuse at Capistrano Doheny Beach, the upcoming nature-based shoreline project at Capistrano Beach, and more. Previously, she was a municipal planner at the city of Newport Beach for 15 years. I'm very excited to have our speakers join us today, and we're going to go ahead and kick it off with Lisa.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm sure many of you are wondering today, why is a water agency talking about sediment management initiatives, right? Why aren't we talking about water? Well, I'm here to let you guys know that there is a global sediment sand crisis, and I want to explain how that is affecting us locally and regionally. It is affecting how we do our water business. I'd like you to take a look at the picture that's on the slide right now. This is a picture of Prado Dam. This is where the Santa Ana River rushes into the dam and where it's held during storm events. And while that water is being held, it is rushing in not just with water, but with sediment. And as it's being held, that sediment settles into the basin behind the dam. And this affects us in how much water we can capture to create a resilient water supply for Central and North Orange County. It affects sensitive species that live in the environment behind the dam in the Prado Basin, a bird species and a fish species that lives in the river proper. And then we also have a local regional need where the coastal communities are literally starving for sand. And this presentation webinar today is to explain how we all need to come together to collaborate regionally to help one another out. And we have two types of stakeholders when it comes to sediment. We have stakeholders who have a lot of sediment and want to get rid of it. And we have stakeholders who are starving for sediment and really need it. So Meta, if we could go to the next slide. So Orange County Water District, who are we? We are a wholesale groundwater supplier. We serve 19 cities and retail water districts in North and Central Orange County. We provide 85% of the drinking water to that area, and 100% of that is locally sourced. We're really proud of that. Next slide. Here is a picture, a side profile of the Prado Dam, which you just saw in the very first slide. And I want to explain what's happening because this is a critical infrastructure piece of our operations. We take about 40% of our water supply from the Santa Ana River. That river flow is operated or stored behind the dam. It's operated by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We have a beautiful partnership with them. That dam is built for flood control. However, they're willing to work with us for water conservation. Water conservation means they're willing to store up to a certain elevation behind the dam, a pool of water that we can then use to recharge into our recharge basins south of the dam in Anaheim. We have a small piece of the flood control plane. We call it a little bathtub. You can see it's depicted right here in the picture at 505 elevation, and that's our water conservation pool. It's 20,000 acre feet. Now, what's really exciting is last week we just were approved for a minor deviation, and that means we are allowed to temporarily elevate our elevation to 508 for 5 years. And that gives us an extra 5,000 acre feet of storage for water conservation. As I mentioned, when that water comes rushing down and hits this dam, you can see that the sediment begins to settle out at the bottom. And what that means is that begins to start filling up our storage capacity, that little bathtub area, and that leaves less and less area for us to hold water. In addition, behind the dam, we have a habitat, a sensitive species actually, who lives there. It is one of the largest riparian forests in Southern California, and there's a little songbird called the leaf-spell's vireo who is dependent on that riparian forest. And so we need to manage how we're operating our supply of water behind the dam and the vegetation and the species who live there. Okay, next slide, please. So we know that all dams trap sediment. It's just how it works. It hits a wall and then the sediment settles out and then the water is released at a slow rate. So that's just part of having dams. Rivers are like arteries in the system, and this would be considered a blockage. So it does block the sediment transfer to the coast. Next slide, please. So here's a side profile of our conservation pool, the area in which we are able and allowed to store a certain amount of water. And we have a certain storage capacity. And I mentioned that we just got the minor deviation to 508. And so we're at 25,000 acre feet of water storage right now. We hope to go higher in the future, but currently we just have the 5-year deviation. Every year and with every storm event, we have a rush of sediment that comes with the water, and it starts filling in that bathtub, and it reduces the amount of storage that we have to percolate into the groundwater basin. So that affects our reliability long-term for water supply. We need to figure out how we're going to manage this sediment accumulation over time, both short-term and long-term, because we know in the next 50 years, we're going to have significant effects to our storage capacity. Next slide. So I just mentioned we have a short-term strategic plan that we're working on, and we're developing a long-term strategic plan for sediment. Next slide. So our short-term is to remove 250,000 cubic yards of sediment from behind the dam. You remember that picture that I showed you. We have a sediment demonstration site where we have previously removed sediment. We're going to reactivate that site and move it out of the riparian forest to some potential stockpile locations that are located next to our Prado field offices. And we're working with the Army Corps of Engineers, who owns the parcels of land, and also the County of Orange. So we're trying to figure out how we can have lease opportunities to move the sediment and then make it publicly available for people who need it. So I mentioned there's two types of sediment stakeholders: people who have a lot of sediment and want to get rid of it. That's Orange County Water District. And then we have people who really need that sediment. There is a local crisis of finding sediment for backfill for projects, CIP project, capital improvement projects. And we have, again, the coastal communities who really need sand. And it just so happens that the sediment that we're pulling out of Prado Basin is sand. It's high quality sand. It's exactly what the coastal communities are looking for and what they need. So the real barrier for us is, how do we get it from Prado out in Corona to coastal communities regionally in Southern California? And we've been looking at innovative ways to find matches, like who has sediment and who needs sediment. And Kevin's going to be talking a lot about that. And through that outreach effort that we conducted, we were able to find uses for sediment reuse. This is such a valuable resource. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of any reuse opportunities for this resource and not landfilling it. That would be a waste. Okay, next slide. So for our short-term project, we're hoping to remove that 250,000 cubic yards over a 5-year period. We are working on our environmental planning and permitting now. We hope to remove sediment next year and then keep removing it annually for 5 years until we reach that limit. And we hope to have it available. So if you know anyone in the Prado Corona area that is in need of fill sediment, please have them reach out to us. Next slide. So we talked about one of the barriers in partnering with coastal communities is actually the cost of getting this really valuable resource to coastal communities. We have on average between dry and wet years, roughly 600,000 cubic yards of sediment coming in and filling up behind the dam. Okay, what does that look like? What does that mean? It's kind of hard to visualize that. Well, if you were to convert that cubic yards into like how many trucks would it take to get it out of Prado, you would be looking at 50,000 truckloads. That's a lot of trucks, probably too many trucks to put on a road. Next slide. Okay, knowing that we have 50,000 truckloads needed, the cost per truckload is $150 to $200, right? And that's just within a 30-mile radius. It's about 33 miles from Prado to coastal communities, the closest coastal communities. And if you were to go south, it'd be even further. So we're looking at $40 to $60 million to try to truck sediment, high quality sand from Prado to coastal communities. And really, that's a hard financial reach. We can't afford that as a public agency, and the coastal communities have not been able to afford that either. So that's our barrier. It's a financial barrier. Next slide. We have been working to find solutions to that financial barrier. We've been working collaboratively, regionally, with many, many different stakeholders to see if we can find grant funding that would enable us to be partners and find a transportation method. We have been looking at rail. We're looking at other options in engineering projects, but trucking, really would be the quickest, easiest if we could get over that financial barrier. We have applied for 2 grants. We unfortunately were not awarded those, but we are continuing to find ways to leverage all of our regional needs together and apply for future grants. Next slide. So our initial stakeholders, and when we started this process, were California State Parks, Orange County Parks, City of Huntington Beach, City of San Clemente, and UCI. And what we've realized as an agency, as Orange County Water District, is that this is such a huge problem. It's not one that necessarily our agency can lead. We really need a regional approach and solution to figuring this out. And so we have decided to hand over the torch a little bit for the regional solution to University of California, Irvine, and to Makana, who's going to be speaking in just a moment at California State Parks. They're going to pick up this torch and kind of help us all come together. Next slide. So what's next? We're going to continue to move forward with our short-term solution and moving 250,000 cubic yards out of Prado in the next 5 years. We'd like to continue that project if we can find partners who need that material. We'll continue to offload to offsite parcels or to other projects nearby that might need sediment. We're also looking to design larger infrastructure projects that maybe would allow us to re-entrain the sediment. And that just means to kind of slurry the sediment up behind the dam and then pipeline it. We call it bypassing around the dam and then input it back on the south side of the dam. And that way it could carry further down to coastal communities, which would be the natural pathway if there was not a dam there. The dam is needed. It is flood control. It keeps us all safe. It also helps us with our water conservation and water supply efforts. So we need both, and we just need to find innovative ways to carry the sediment around the dam. We're looking again for those regional partnerships. We're looking for rail infrastructure opportunities. And of course, we're looking for innovative ways to connect with others so that we can match up our resources to people who really need them. And it is my pleasure to turn over the next innovative step to sediment matchmaking and give it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Lisa. That tees me up quite well into what I'm going to talk about here today. It's my pleasure to bring forth an idea that OCWD has been exploring to try to find what Lisa alluded to here of matches. So we know that this problem that we're facing in Prado Basin is much larger than what we can handle alone. And so we need to bring a lot of people together and the right people together to help move this large quantity of sediment and use it really as a resource in our region. And so before we could kind of look forward, we've done some work in the past on some large projects and some sediment projects, since we wanted to look back and see what was working and what didn't work, to kind of have some lessons learned before we started teeing up this next undertaking. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned before, OCWD, through just our normal operations and maintenance, does have or has had some excess sediment that has accumulated over time. These are small projects, usually just in the cleaning out of our recharge basins or maybe maintaining our diversion channel. And the way we've treated these in the past is we found people just kind of word of mouth, where we had excess and they had need. And sometimes those would work out and sometimes those wouldn't. A lot of times there was a timing consideration where what we had available wasn't available when the users needed it. And sometimes the quality of what they were looking for didn't quite match the quality of what we had. And so we knew those were considerations that needed to be incorporated into our long-term solution. And unfortunately, historically, if we couldn't find a match, some of this material was taken to landfills because we needed it out of our operations areas. And we treated it sometimes as a waste, and that was an unfortunate reality of the past. Next slide, please. No OCWD webinar is complete without at least a mention of groundwater replenishment system, which is a very innovative and forward-thinking wastewater recycling project. And so there's some lessons that we could take from this large challenging project that we undertook as an agency in the early 2000s that we thought could be applicable to our approach to sediment. And so one of the things that we knew we needed to change internally and externally was looking at sediment as a resource, not a waste. This is something that the region needs, and we play a vital role in what we are collecting behind Prado Dam, and we can play a vital role in solutions. We also knew that technology could work in our favor. What we were kind of envisioning here was with technology and social media opportunities, that people can be brought together to have similar interests and similar needs. And using technology to our advantage to bring people together could be a great mechanism for us to find partners. And just like the groundwater replenishment system, we knew that big solutions require collaboration and partnerships, just like we have with OC Sand next door. And so we took these same sort of lessons learned and we tried to apply them to sediment. And what we were envisioning again was a platform where we could post online what we had available, and people could come look and see if what we had fit their needs, and vice versa, where we could go out and look at other projects and reach out to them and kind of bridge that gap to look for those partnerships. And what we jokingly referred to internally was kind of a sediment dating app, where we could find needs and wants and put them together, and everyone could kind of find what they needed. And what we were kind of surprised to find is we weren't the first with this idea. Next slide, please. And so in our quick searches for what was available online, no surprises here, kind of the area that spearheads a lot of things technology, had already come up with an idea similar to this, albeit not exactly the same. So the San Francisco Estuary Institute had developed a program called SediMatch, which was focused on the Bay Area, and it was really designed to bring people together as a planning tool to have conversations in advance of projects, so that partnerships could be made and that we could coordinate, sediment quality and permitting, etc. But in this instance, the focal point here was really on wetland and habitat restoration, and those are the drivers for why this SediMatch was built for the Bay Area. And so we reached out to SediMatch folks and basically asked them if we thought there was an applicability for we could adopt this in Southern California, knowing that there might be some different drivers for the sediment needs and availability in Southern California. San Francisco Estuary Institute was very supportive of this idea. And so as a way to bring awareness to this effort that we were putting forth, we got our PR team involved, and we created a video, and we hosted a handful of workshops to help get some input on the needs of Southern California for sediment, and bring some awareness to it. So next slide. So we're going to go ahead and show a snippet of the video that we created here. The larger version is online on YouTube if you want to look it up, but this is just a kind of high level look at the video that we created and how this helps set up our SediMatch workshops.
Now that's some serious sediment. Ever feel like you just have so much to give? Or maybe that you're in need of something to fill an emptiness? That's right! We're talking about having excess sediment or needing some. Well, there's a website for that. It's called SediMatch, and it's the best way to find your potential match in sediment.
So knowing that we were doing a sediment dating app, we made these workshops really fun. In-person meetings we had with various different regions in Southern California. And there were 3 workshops that were held in the fall of last year, focused on North Orange County and Los Angeles, Inland Empire, Riverside, San Bernardino, and also South Orange County and San Diego, to really understand and bring awareness to this new tool that we were trying to spearhead in Southern California. And overall, the feedback was really positive. And what we learned through this process was that what OCWD was experiencing was not unique to us. So next slide. And so I wanted to show the group here what SediMatch is. It's a very simple tool, mapping tool, where it shows the location of where material can be available In this case, with the blue triangles are locations within Southern California where sediment is available, and the red circles are areas where material is needed. And if you click on any one of these, it's going to pull down some very basic information that helps the user determine if a potential match could be made. And then really what this is designed to do is be a planning tool so that you can filter through these different projects and opportunities and timing and availability and quantities, and then take the conversation really off this platform. So we had, again, some really fun and playful workshops with this that were, again, really fun. So again, this one's showing our availability that Lisa mentioned behind Prado Dam, so that 125,000 cubic yards we have to do twice for our obligation. And then next slide, please. And then very similar corollary here for the areas that had sediment needed. So this is an area down in South Orange County that Makana is overseeing. And so very basic, but very useful tool to help us understand where our potential matches and potential partners could be. Next slide, please. So we had a great dialogue at these workshops. They were really enjoyable and really fun. And overall, the feedback was really positive. Again, when we started this effort, SediMatch had zero locations in Southern California. And through these workshops, we were able to add 45 new projects. And we only think we've scratched the surface as far as what's out there. Already through this effort, we've found potential matches that we're taking offline and having some conversations with to see if we can actually start moving physical material. And I think one of the big outcomes here, which is going to really speak a little bit more to what Makana is going to talk about in a moment, is we really learned through this process is OCWD's needs to remove sediment out of Prado Dam was really not unique to us. We do have a large quantity as part of our obligation, and Prado Dam is stopping an enormous quantity of material every year. This is not unique to us. And so it really spearheaded the need for more of a regional approach. Next slide, please. And so as Lisa already mentioned, what are the next steps for SediMatch? So we got a lot of really good feedback from this workshop about how we could customize this tool to be more Southern California specific. And so we're still working through some of the intricacies of how that can be applied. But ultimately, we're going to need funding for anything related to SediMatch and or sediment removal efforts, larger scale. And as mentioned before, any big solution like this is going to require a lot of partnerships and collaborations. And Makana is going to speak a lot more to this in a moment about Southern California specifically. And moving forward, we do view SediMatch as being a critical communication and planning tool, where we can look at these projects in advance and we can position ourselves for funding opportunities and get our permits in line together and take more of a holistic approach to sediment management in the region versus having OCWD or other agencies do it by themselves. And so with that, I'm going to be passing this over to Makana Nova to talk a little bit about collaboration that she is spearheading in Orange County.
Hi, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you passing it over to me, and thank you to the Orange County Water District for hosting this webinar and inviting me to participate. Really appreciate it. So my name is Makana Nova. I am the relatively new Coastal Resources Manager to OC Parks, and previously I held a position called Coastal Planning Manager. I was a little more involved with project support for projects, and we'll talk about some of those projects today, but also my new role going forward here. Next slide, please. So first, I wanted to speak a little bit about our parks and the needs. So we're coming from the flip side of the coin here. When you look at SediMatch, you know, we're those little red dots along the coastline where we need sand. So this is Capistrano Beach, one of the beaches that Orange County Parks manages. And this is a photo taken in 2018 following a major winter storm. I think it was in January 2018. So you can see these recreation facilities were severely damaged and have now been removed from Capistrano Beach. This was a boardwalk, a lateral access point along the coast. And then you can see the basketball court and restrooms there. Can you flip to the next slide, please? And then here is, an overhead view of that same area and just how much damage that beach has seen. So looking at the rocks and the riprap there used to be 100-foot width of sand in front of this. So back in about 1970s, this area did receive a lot of sand replenishment as part of the construction of the Dana Point Harbor. It also had more natural sand replenishment through San Juan Creek. So with both of those, we have not had new sand replenishment in recent decades. San Juan Creek, there's been a lot of development in South Orange County that has really channelized the flood control dam there and limited the amount of sand that comes out and feeds this beach. So you can see a lot of erosion. We have just begun sand nourishment in the last couple of years. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But first, I want to walk back. You can go to the next slide. So we've talked a lot about the need for collaboration along the way. And my new position as Coastal Resource Manager is really to kind of focus my role on beaches to looking more at collaboration among our South Orange County agencies, building like an MOU for our South County agencies to prioritize beaches and prioritize sand nourishment in general. So, and then lastly, once we prioritize those projects, then to advocate for funding for those beaches and managing sand as a resource. Next slide, please. So my position is really built from the recommendations of the South Orange County Regional Coastal Resilience Strategic Plan. A little bit of a mouthful. I like to say this so crisp, or it's the strategic plan for short. But the primary recommendations from looking at this was a huge stakeholder effort from looking at the geographic area from Dana Point south to the county line. So cities that are part of that geographic area, beach managers, as well as transportation lines and critical infrastructure like OCTA were also part of that effort. So the goal here, again, is to form a regional collaborative through an MOU or governance structure, and then to prioritize future projects. That's like basically sand nourishment is the top priority, but secondary to that is sand retention projects and prioritizing those sand retention projects so that the sand we place does not simply go out to the ocean. And then lastly, finding ways to implement projects, pursue funding for those projects. Next slide, please. So we're finding along the way, collaboration is really key to making this effort go round, especially in looking at sand management for Orange County. We're finding that, each agency has a different strength, and pooling those resources for permitting processes really creates a more efficient process overall. So I speak to streamlining here on the slide. So if each agency is able to contribute a different strength or task toward the broader regional effort, we're all gaining something in turn toward coastal resiliency. And then lastly, I mentioned here on the slide, closing the gap of collaborative groups. So Orange County is kind of a gap right now in official collaborative agencies. Ventura and Santa Barbara County have Beacon. LA County has LA County Harbors and Beaches. And then San Diego has the SANDAG and the Shoreline Preservation Working Group. So all of those groups and agencies are well organized throughout Southern California. They have a lot of the same similar needs. And we're learning from those agencies and seeking to build a similar collaborative for Orange County. So that would be closing that gap in collaboration. Next slide, please. So this Venn diagram here, there's a lot going on, but the point being is that this is kind of a project example of how sand nourishment projects and a collaborative sand nourishment project can really work together among agencies to build toward what I call this blue star of coastal resilience, state of Zen. So each agency as a receiver site, those were the red dots on the SediMatch map, are contributing staff and permitting time toward regulatory permitting. The source sites, such as Orange County Public Works or Orange County Water District, have sand sources, and they need to remove that sand for flood capacity. So they're contributing the material itself. And then the example I give here would be for rail transport. So OCTA, this is a possibility we've thrown around about railing sand down. I think since we've found that may be more logistically difficult rail than like trucking transport, but point being, this would be a trucking or transportation agency here that's contributing ways to transport sand as a resource to the beaches. So everyone is contributing something, everyone is gaining something as well that is working toward this Blue Star coastal resilience. And a little shout out here to LA County Harbors and Beaches. Go ahead and click next. We've got a little duck here with a blue star. So point being, we glide on the surface, but we're all working hard together under the surface toward this common goal of coastal resilience. So next slide, please. So one of the project priorities, I think for the South Orange County region, at least, is to pursue sand nourishment in Southern California. And the pros of this effort are really to, it's a softer solution than harder solutions like seawalls, which are not well accepted among regulatory agencies such as the Coastal Commission. So this has economic benefits as well as recreational benefits for Orange County. Beaches are very important to tourism and are a huge piece of the economics for Orange County. But also this soft, more natural solution is really more well received than these harder solutions have been. So the major con to sand nourishment, though, is it's difficult to source sand. You know, it's cheapest really to find offshore sand sources, but that is, you know, an effort that other agencies are undergoing, such as the city of San Clemente. There are sand sources up by Huntington offshore, but really today we're looking at land sources and making that a more efficient use of what would naturally be flowing out to the ocean. So looking at our flood control systems, examining that, and making use of what might otherwise be discarded in a landfill or to another development project, and making use of that for our beaches. So the main challenge and con, again, is cost, and really looking at sand as a resource and funding and planning for that in the future. Next slide, please. So here's the primary example I gave. You saw Capistrano Beach and some of the storm damage that Capistrano Beach has seen over the last few years. 2023 and 2024, we have done some pilot beneficial sand reuse projects. This drone shot taken here was, I think, from 2023, where we imported 45,000 cubic yards of sand to both Haney and Capistrano state beaches in partnership with California State Parks, Orange County Public Works. And this sand source came out of the Santa Ana River, the channelized section further up, kind of near the 405 area. And so this was all sediment that flowed down through the storm system into the channel and was clogging the system. So it cleared the channel, but it was also beach ready. And so we have to go through biological sand composition and chemical analysis along the way to make sure that it is beach compatible. But we do have some approvals in place that help facilitate sand nourishment for Capistrano Beach, where we go through a notification and a coastal development permit waiver with Coastal Commission to help expedite up to 20,000 cubic yards a year for Capistrano Beach. So that is sort of like our pilot project for sand nourishment. I know San Clemente was also able to take advantage of the sand that was made available in the Santa Ana River by Public Works last year. So that partnership has been a great start to looking at sand and how that transports and moves within our region in South Orange County. Next slide. But that being said, we know that sand nourishment alone is not the answer, because sand more easily enters the littoral cell and the system. That's the geographic area between Dana Point, and that littoral cell moves all the way south down to La Jolla. So sand within those areas moves up and down the coast throughout time and the way geography and our currents work. So the next step is really to look at retention projects. We do have a nature-based shoreline project planned for Capistrano Beach. And this is really a cobble berm covered by a dune system and planted with native plants to hold and retain plantings. This has a $9.8 million federal grant. That's a BRIC grant, and we're looking forward to getting our AE contractor on board and finalizing our design in the next year for that project. So it already has a coastal development permit in place. So we are actively working toward that in the longer run. Next slide, please. There's a visual sim of what that living shoreline project would look like when it's finished. And if you've ever been to Cardiff in the city of Encinitas, that's probably a pretty close example of what we're looking at implementing for Capistrano and Doheny as well. And that is a project in partnership with California State Parks as well. And go ahead, next slide. And I also wanted to highlight today a project that Orange County Public Works is spearheading. This is an effort for all of Orange County, looking at beaches that could accept sand for sand nourishment, and Public Works is leading the way really in the regulatory permitting side to look at the specific profiles that can accept sand, where that are free of biologically sensitive areas, and then the volumes that those areas could accept. So they are pursuing regulatory permits with Coastal Commission, Army Corps, the Water Quality Control Board to really lay the groundwork to streamline permitting so that all of our beaches that are appropriate for sand nourishment can easily accept sand when the time is right, when sand is available, so that the regulatory permitting process isn't the primary barrier. So that's probably about a year out, but thanks to Orange County Public Works for their work in making this happen. And that's called a SCOOP. It's a Sand Compatibility and Opportunistic Use Program. Next slide, please. So we have lots of other partnerships we're working toward. Lisa and Kevin have both mentioned the possibility of identifying a stockpile site along the transportation route. So I think they're looking at stockpile opportunities close to the dam area to make that available to public entities for sand nourishment or development projects in the region. We've also partnered on grant opportunities. Hopefully, our continued partnership will be successful in the near future. We've also partnered with OCTA, looking at the potential for rail, looking at the feasibility of rail. It's proving to be very challenging just because of the limited volume that rail can carry, as well as onloading and offloading logistics. We're finding that anytime you move sediment, you'd have to truck it to the train would move it, and then truck it from the train to a source site or to a receiver site. Every time you move it, it costs the same amount. So you're almost paying 3 times the amount when you do use rail. So that's been a great partnership and exercise to walk through to understand the feasibility. We continue to keep our eyes open for other opportunities for transport. And next slide, please. So getting toward funding. I mentioned early on in my presentation about regional collaboration and looking at filling that gap in collaboration. So we do speak with some of the other collaboratives in the region and learning from their best practices. So Beacon operates in Santa Barbara and Ventura, LA County Harbors and Beaches, County of Orange for Orange County, and then San Diego Association of Governments, that's SANDAG, and their shoreline preservation working group. So we've worked closely with these agencies at a staff level so that we can understand our common needs and then support each other in pursuing grant funding, because they have a lot of the same needs. Beaches throughout Southern California have the same challenges due to urbanization and development and channelization and flood control that has occurred in the last 100 years. So that is an ongoing effort. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then tying it back here to SediMatch, this is a great visual tool to very quickly show that we have these sand sources shown in the blue triangles, and then we have this need shown in the red dots here. And as a visual tool to pursue funding, I think this is a great opportunity to very quickly show that, like, look, sources are here, receiver sites are here. How do we get from point A to point B and support that with a resource management system? Next slide, please. And that's really all I have to add here. I think it's important to kind of shift our mindset from just looking at water, just looking at utilities. Sand should be looked at as a resource and a utility as well. So that's kind of the more cutting edge concept, and then funding for that resource as well. And I think that's all I have to say today. I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Makana, Kevin, and Lisa. That was a great way to close out the webinar here. I would like to invite our speakers who are already back on camera here during the Q&A portion. So I'd like to encourage any attendees to go ahead and submit your question in the Q&A box, and we'll try and do our best to get to as many questions live today. And we'll go ahead and get started. This, I believe, is for our OCD folks. So we have a 5-year plan to remove sediment behind Prado Dam. Where do you store that sediment before it is claimed by others?
I can take that. We are looking to secure 2 parcels of land that are next to our Prado field offices. One parcel is owned by Army Corps of Engineers and is currently leased by someone else, but their lease is expiring this year. And so we're hoping that will create an opening for us to take over that land lease and then be able to stockpile locally right there outside of the basin. And then just adjacent to that parcel is another parcel owned by County Flood Control. And we are working on negotiations with them simultaneously to have access and do a land lease with them as well. So we're working with both entities in parallel. It does take quite a bit of time, more time than you would think, to try to secure these locations. But we're working through it, and we're looking forward to the partnership. The idea would be that these would be regional stockpile locations where either public or private entities could come and pick up the sand for free. They just need to pay for their transportation.
And in relation to sand storage, another question or another option possibly was, why not maybe truck and dump sand in the Santa Ana River downstream of the recharge area? Is that a consideration?
That is a consideration. Again, there's a cost, right? You have 50,000 trucks that you have to fund to be able to do that. So again, there's a cost barrier to doing that, which is why we're looking at a more engineered project proposal, which would be the slurrying of the sediment behind the dam and then piping it, bypassing it across. We think that's a longer term solution. It would do less damage to the roadways to have, this way you're taking the trucks off the road. Also, you wouldn't be impacting the housing community as well with all these trucks going by, right? So we're looking for more sustainable long-term solutions that are more cost affordable over time.
And Lisa and team, speaking of costs, that is a question we have here as well. Is OCWD using the excess sediment as a revenue stream, or are you providing this product, this sediment, at no cost? And then sort of similarly, does OCWD incur costs to dispose of sediment? And I know, Lisa, you've been speaking to that, but if you'd like to kind of expand on that point or.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to cost us a few $1 million just to get the sediment relocated out of Prado Basin to the nearby parcels, millions of dollars just to move it a short distance. But once we do get it there, we're making it publicly available, so anyone can pick it up for free.
And we do have a question about are there any kind of either water quality or any PFAS presence in sediment that you're seeing as a possible issue?
So I think we could probably all speak to this, but I'll just start it off. We have already done the sediment testing for constituents of concern. So we have a profile of what's in our sediment, and we've made that publicly available on the website, the SediMatch website, which is great. You get to upload your sediment profile and see if you are a water quality constituent match, right? So have you been tested? Yes, we have. We've been tested. So that's good to know what you're getting. And the biggest issue would be maybe trash removal. So there might be a need at the stockpile location when you pick it up to do some sieving, but we do a chemical analysis of the sediment. So you know what's available ahead of time before you come pick it up.
And I'll add for the beach side, we absolutely test for beach quality sand to make sure for both composition and chemical testing that they meet a wide panel of parameters for placement on our beaches and public use.
And we have compared testing results, and we know that we're a
Yes.
match. It's just
Yeah,
really
so
the interpretation.
we can look at a profile and the force to find sand in the range of what is at the beach, and then where the source sand falls within that range, making sure that it's compatible with this.
Just to plug a little bit for the SediMatch side of things, one of the things that we envisioned in the development of this tool and the customization for Southern California was to build in some of those kind of screening tools so that we could help put the right people in conversation with the right people so that these matches could be taken offline, and we can actually start physically moving some of the sediment around to where it's needed most. So this is a well taken point.
Yeah, and I'll just throw out, we're gonna put this stockpile together. We're open to public-private partnerships. If there's a private entity that wants to come in and maybe perhaps set up a sand cleaning station to make it more readily available. Those are the kinds of ideas and partnerships we're looking to talk about. We're just trying to see what's available to us. What are the opportunities? And then we'll have to look at the lease agreements, the land lease agreements on what we're allowed to do as well.
Thank you, everyone. So we know for Prado Dam, that's Prado Dam, as we know, was constructed in 1941. Do you have a sense of how long sediment has been accumulating behind Prado Dam?
Well, the easy answer is since it's been built, right? It's just the water is always flowing with sediment. They come hand in hand. You can't really separate the two until they settle out. And so we have a rough idea, but it's rough. We don't want to give any numbers because we really need to study it more, but we have an idea of how much sand has accumulated over time, but we'd like to have a better monitoring program. So moving forward, we're working on a long-term sediment monitoring program right behind Prado, but also at stations in the river proper, so we can better understand what's coming in. And we know that it changes over time. We know that with the large storm events, we have a huge slug of sediment that just comes down the river versus just everyday base flows. So understanding what's coming in with each level storm really makes a difference. And that's what we need to monitor.
Great. And similarly for Makana, we've had our, of course, beautiful OC beaches here for a very long time as well. When did we really start to tackle this issue of coastal resiliency and using sand as a resource, as you say?
Sure, I'd say it's fairly recent. Like I mentioned, a lot of our beaches had sand nourishment from development projects in the 1970s. With the creation of Coastal Commission and other regulatory agencies, that became a very difficult process in more recent decades, which is probably why you haven't seen any sand nourishment since that time period. And then, now that's not to poo-poo the Coastal Commission or anything. I think they've begun to change their ideas about sand nourishment, become more supportive, especially, with our pilot projects in the last couple of years. They've been really helpful at helping us find pathways to make those projects happen. But as far as looking at, how that's developed and how it's become an issue, I think it's really become an issue in probably the last 5 to 10 years. We've seen a lot more erosion on our South Orange County beaches, especially. And then the the strategic plan that I mentioned earlier, that process was initiated 2021, I want to say, in the late, the 2020s. So we really started to look at that, and the overarching need among our agencies was that we need to collaborate together and work together to find these solutions. And the last 2 storm seasons have been very strong, storm heavy, a lot of rain coming down through the systems these last 2 years. And we've seen a lot more coastal erosion with that. And it's come to the forefront, come to the media a lot more too. So looking at sand as a resource has come more to the forefront as a result.
Great, thank you. Going back to Prado Dam, Lisa and Kevin, Orange County Water District doesn't operate the dam, but can you speak to, was Prado Dam built with, or does it have any outlet features that allow for sediment, seasonal sediment releases or flushing episodes that facilitate the release of sediment to downstream Orange County down the Santa Ana River?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was originally built with sediment flow in the very early years, and they quickly turned that off. And they have no wish to reopen those or re-engage those. So there is no option moving forward to put sand through the dam. And it's a little tricky because we also have our infiltration basins, which are downstream of the dam. And so that fine silt that comes through, it clogs up our infiltration basins and doesn't allow us then to capture as much water as we would like for water supply. So we do need to find this balance between putting sediment back into the river where it doesn't affect our operations. So we need to think strategically and design a project that fills both needs, because reliable water supply for Orange County is very, very important, and we don't want to give up that reliability and local supply. We'd like to do both, and we need to find an engineering innovative solution that would allow us to do both, get this valuable resource to the coast and also allow us to continue to operate for water supply.
Thank you, Lisa. And we are at the top of the hour here, so I do just want to jump in and say thank you again so much to our speakers today, Makana, Lisa, and Kevin, for your great presentation and for connecting us all together. That was really a strong theme in your presentation. And thank you all to our attendees for joining us today. Final reminder that this webinar is being recorded, so you'll all get a copy of it as well, and it will also be posted to OCWD's YouTube channel. And if you have any questions for us or for any of our speakers that you think of after, please do email us at info@ocwd.com. And we look forward to staying in touch. And thank you again, everyone. I hope everyone has a great day.